An alternate Earth episode and a Kirk kills a computer episode? It's two tropes in one. That's what I call value for your Trek dollar. Or what I would call it if they used money. This is a review of the Star Trek The Original Series episode, The Return of the Archons. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know what happens in it, be warned, spoilers beyond this point. So, inexplicably Earth-like society populated by aliens indistinguishable from humans, check. Superficially peaceful and benevolent civilization with a dark underbelly, check. Everything being secretly controlled by a powerful computer, check. All that, plus the first reference to the Prime Directive. There's a lot going on in this episode, so let's jump right in. Sulu and some schmo in a tricorn hat are running through the dusty streets of Dodge City when the schmo falls down and the two of them wind up cornered by a pair of druids. The schmo, whose name is O'Neill, is like, "Let's get out of here, these people are bad news, man," and breaks loose and takes off. Sulu pulls his communicator and calls the Enterprise for a beam out, but just before the transporter activates, the druids reach him and zap him with one of their sticks. Sulu beams up to the Enterprise. Captain Kirk is waiting in the transporter room, and Sulu's acting all weird suddenly, smiling blissfully. "They're the most wonderful people in the universe," he says, describing the people he was fleeing from in fear of his life a moment ago. "This planet is paradise." Paradise. Sounds like somebody's caught a case of the Paradise Syndrome. Not you. Not yet. Sulu and O'Neill were sent down undercover to this planet, Beta 3, to investigate what became of the Archon, a starship that disappeared after visiting here 100 years ago. I used to think that detail was odd, waiting a century to investigate the disappearance of a ship, but now, having watched the rest of the Star Trek franchise and seeing how frequently starships just crash or blow up or vanish without explanation, it makes perfect sense that it would take Starfleet 100 years to get around to checking into what happened to the Archon. There's apparently quite a backlog. Since Sulu was no help finding out what happened to the Archon, Kirk beams down to Beta 3 with a landing party that also includes Spock, McCoy, a couple of security officers, and this dude Lindstrom, who has a lot of lines for a random extra guy on the away team and should probably just have been Sulu. The group is approached by a friendly chap named Bilar, who welcomes the strangers to town, recommends a place to stay while they're here, and oops, it's 6 o'clock, time to tear off that mask of civility. We know from the teaser and Sulu's strange behavior after returning to the ship that there's something not right about this place. The first specific indication of that is what happens next. They call it the festival. When the clock strikes 6, the red hour, everyone in town instantly drops whatever they're doing and goes apeshit, rioting, smashing windows, fighting, and, implicitly, committing and enduring wanton acts of sexual assault. Nice town you've got there. The members of the landing party flee to the hotel Bilar recommended before everybody went caveman, and there they are met by Rager, Tamar, and Hakam. Rager and Tamar seem cool, and Hakam is a total dick. All three of them are confused by how calm Kirk and the others are and how disinterested they seem in the festival, but Hakam is especially pushy about it. He's like, "You're young men, you should be in the streets raping and pillaging." Kirk's like, "We're not going back out there, it's like 10-cent beer night out there." Hakam is like, "You're not of the body. I'm telling Landru, oh, you're in for it now," and he leaves. A little while later, after the festival is over and everyone in town has reverted to being shiny, happy people, he comes back with two of the druids and he's like, "These guys here, they're not of the body. Also, Tamar mocked Landru, I heard him." So one of the druids kills Tamar with a blast from his pyro stick, and then they tell Kirk and the rest of the landing party to follow them to be absorbed. But Kirk's like, "Nah." The druid goes, "Wait, what?" "I said, nah. We're not going anywhere." "But I told you to." "And I said, nah." What is with this guy? The druids are so unaccustomed to people refusing to comply with their orders that they have no idea what to do. While they commune with each other and Landru, whatever that is, to figure out what to do next, Rager leads Kirk and the others out of the hotel and through the town toward a hiding place he knows, because it turns out Rager is not of the body either, whatever that means. Along the way, the entire population of the town is possessed and comes after them with clubs, but the landing party's phasers take care of that without too much problem. They find O'Neill, the officer who bailed on Sulu in the teaser, and take him along even though Rager says it's a bad idea because O'Neill is of the body, which means when he wakes up from being stunned, Landru will be able to use him to locate the rest of them. So when they get to Rager's hideout, Kirk has McCoy sedate O'Neill. While at the hideout, Rager drops some exposition. The crew of the starship Archon, or simply Archons as the people of Beta 3 call them, were here 100 years ago. Landru destroyed their ship, killed some of them, absorbed the rest into the body, which is what Landru calls the population of Beta 3 that is obedient to him. There are some, very few, who are able to resist being absorbed into the body, and they form a small resistance to Landru. The resistance organizes in groups of 3. Rager and the now dead Tamar were 2 members of such a 3-person group, but Rager has never actually met the third. Kirk's like, interesting, thanks for all that information. Hey, let me call the Enterprise and see how everything's going up there. I'm sure it's fine. Turns out, it's not fine. Scotty's like, the ship is being bombarded by heat beams from the planet's surface, which are draining power and weakening the shields. Also, our orbit is decaying. We can't hold out like this for much longer. Thanks for calling. Spock detects a powerful sensor probe sweeping through the area, and then a hologram of a man appears on the wall. Landru. Landru's like, you're fucking my shit up down here, so you will be absorbed. And then Landru plays a hypersonic tone that knocks everybody out. They wake up in a dungeon and notice that Dr. McCoy is missing. Spock also observes that the behavior of the lawgivers, the druids, reminds him of a computer. When Kirk refused to comply with them at Rager's place, they had no idea what to do, like computers that had insufficient data. The druids bring McCoy back, and he's been changed. Now he's all, hello friends, under his eye, like Sulu was. It's Kirk's turn next. He tries the nah trick again, but it doesn't work this time. The druid says, come along or die. And Kirk's like, in that case, I'll come along. They take him to the absorption chamber, and this guy, Marplon, shows up, tells the druids to take a hike, and starts up the machine with Kirk restrained against the wall. We cut back to the dungeon, where the druids return. One of them points at Spock and says, you. Come. And Spock's like, but it hasn't been 7 years yet. Ah! No, I'm just playing. And he follows the druids. So it turns out Marplon is the secret third guy in Rager's resistance group. And he doesn't really absorb Kirk or Spock. He just goes through the motions and tells them to fake it for now. And he gives them back their phasers, which were confiscated when they were thrown in the dungeon. Kirk and Spock have a quiet discussion in the corner where they decide that Landru is not a real guy. He's probably a computer or something, and that whatever Landru is, they have to destroy him because he's stolen the free will of the people of this planet. Spock's like, but what about our directive of non-interference? You're not just going to blow that off? And Kirk's like, of course not. I'm going to interpret it in such a way that it lets me do whatever I want. Marplon and Rager show up, and they start talking about Landru with Kirk and Spock, but McCoy, who is still under Landru's mind control, realizes what they're doing and starts shouting for the druids. Kirk grabs McCoy like, quiet, Bones. Snitches get stitches. You should know that. You're a surgeon. He chokes McCoy out, and when the druids show up, Kirk and Spock overpower them and put on their robes. Marplon leads them to Landru's office, where the Landru hologram appears again and goes, okay, I'm just going to kill you and kill everyone who knows about you, and that'll be that. Cool? Cool. But Kirk's like, no, not cool. And he and Spock blast through the wall with their phasers, revealing that Landru is, in fact, a computer. The computer's like, I am Landru. The real Landru programmed me with all of his knowledge before he died, so now I'm him, and I must destroy you for the good of the body, because ensuring the good of the body, that's my whole deal. And Kirk's like, I've got this motherfucker now. He tells Landru, you're programmed to act for the good of the body, but you yourself have harmed the body by robbing the people of their free will and creativity. Therefore, in order to carry out your programming and protect the good of the body, you must destroy yourself. What do you say to that? Landru is like, damn, your logic is airtight, and promptly destroys itself, hilariously crying out, help me, as it dies, smoking and throwing off sparks. Marplon is there like, was that Landru? And Kirk's like, yep, and now he's dead. Thanks for all your help. You're on your own now. Have fun rebuilding your entire society from scratch after being mind-controlled by a computer for thousands of years. Gotta go. Bye. And the landing party returns to the ship, which is fine now that Landru is gone. Sulu is back to normal, as presumably is McCoy. Kirk mentions that they're leaving behind a team of experts to help the people of Beta 3 restore their culture without Landru. Oh, hey, did you hear that? They're leaving behind a party of experts. Everything will be fine. The end. Return of the Archons is not a bad episode, but it's definitely one of those shows that is more interesting to think about and talk about than it is to actually watch. It contains some compelling, if somewhat shallow ideas, features some familiar and fun Star Trek tropes, and provides great fodder for jokes. But its plot is slow-moving and very straightforward, and its most promising concepts show up near the very beginning and the very end, with a lot of not very much happening in between. I'll start with the good stuff. The introduction and establishing of Beta 3 and its whole messed-up deal is well done. There's very little direct exposition until Rager's info dump once they get to his hideout. Up until then, we see events through the eyes of Kirk and the others from the Enterprise, without explanation, which gives events like the festival or the appearances of the lawgivers a power they wouldn't otherwise have. When the red hour strikes and the people on the street start spontaneously running wild, yes, it's over the top and unintentionally funny, but it's also kind of scary. Not just because the whole town has erupted into sudden chaos and violence, but because our heroes, and therefore we, have no idea why. Throughout the episode, we also hear people from Beta 3 referring to the body and being absorbed without those terms ever being explicitly defined. We're allowed to watch and figure it out as the story unfolds. And sure, it's fairly obvious, because what's happening with Landru and the people of Beta 3 isn't all that complicated, but it's still better that the script trusts us to be able to work it out for ourselves, rather than spoon-feeding us by having Rager explain to Kirk exactly what the body is and what being absorbed means. However, that admirable restraint and respect for the intelligence of the audience aside, the writing of this episode is mostly unremarkable. There are two concepts here with a lot of potential: the whole Red Hour festival thing and Landru, the god dictator who is secretly a computer. But like I said, they only really come into play at the beginning and the end of the episode, respectively, and neither one of them is explored very much at all. The festival, a scheduled period of time during which all laws are suspended and citizens are free to do whatever they want, feels like a strong enough concept to carry an entire episode itself, or perhaps more than an episode, maybe even a whole series of films. But in the Return of the Archons, it just kind of happens. It's over before the second commercial break, and it's not really mentioned again for the rest of the episode. Hey, remember that festival thing that happened yesterday? That was pretty kooky. And Landru turning out to be a computer is so heavily foreshadowed and resolved so quickly after being revealed that it doesn't really leave much of an impression either. Kirk and Spock figure out that the Landru figure they've seen projected as a hologram isn't a real person, that Landru is actually a computer, and Kirk decides they should destroy it. Then they go to Landru's chamber, confirm that he is in fact a computer, and destroy him just like they planned. The entire episode is like that. Simple, few, if any, complications. The closest thing to a twist is the introduction of Marplon, and even that's routine. Rager mentions a third member of his resistance cell, and then, when all hope seems lost for Kirk, this guy we've never seen before shows up and sends the druids away, and gee, I wonder who he'll turn out to be. Another example is the absorption of McCoy. Even though DeForest Kelley's name isn't in the opening credits yet, by this point in the series, McCoy is firmly in place as the third most important character on the show. His friendship with Kirk and antagonistic but respectful rapport with Spock have been established. However, when he is turned by Landru, when he becomes one of them, it's only so he can be present in the dungeon with the others to call the guards when it's time for Kirk, Spock, and Marplon to escape and go find Landru. Until he overhears them plotting and starts crying out for the lawgivers, McCoy just sort of hangs around in the background of shots, reminding us that he's there, otherwise doing nothing. There's no weight to what's happened, no sense of fear from Kirk that he may lose one of his senior officers and best friends to this brainwashing. It's functional from a purely plot-based perspective, but it doesn't feel like it means anything. That's the entire episode, really. Nothing is bad, everything makes sense, but it's flat. Opening credits, events transpire, closing credits. Drab, predictable, and apart from the festival, mostly uneventful. Just like life on Beta 3. Wow, that's deep, huh? But like I said, it's still a fun episode. I'm always a sucker for alternate Earth settings. That's why I picked that for the theme of this batch of retro reviews. And I appreciate how Return of the Archons wastes not a single frame of its running time, even attempting to explain why this town looks exactly like a 19th century American town, or why the people dress exactly like 18th and 19th century Americans, or why they look exactly like humans. The Enterprise crew doesn't seem to give a shit or even notice, so why should we? Aliens identical to humans, living in a town identical to towns on Earth. How did this happen? Who cares? Not the point. Just go with it. Star Trek, baby! And, of course, there's also the resolution, in which we get to see Captain Kirk talk a computer to death. His attitude in the aftermath of Landru's destruction is so flippant. I laughed out loud watching it this morning. He's like, well, that's the end of Landru, Marplon. Good luck figuring out this free will thing, and you druids should really think about changing careers. I'm out. That's almost literally what he says and how he says it. I'm just barely paraphrasing. It's great. Killing computers with his words becomes one of Kirk's specialties. He does it a few more times throughout the series, but honestly, it doesn't seem that hard. Apparently, all that's necessary to induce an evil computer to self-destruct is to find a way of describing its actions that makes it sound like they're in conflict with its programming, and it blows itself up. It's been operating with that deadly contradiction in place for thousands of years, but once Kirk points it out, Landru is toast within a matter of seconds. So let that be a lesson, kids. Self-awareness kills. Those are my thoughts on the Return of the Archons. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments if you'd like to support this channel. And I sure wish you would, if you can afford it. You can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me again next week as this batch of reviews dedicated to episodes dealing with other Earths continues. Next Thursday is Thanksgiving here in the US, but I'm recording the video early, so I can eat turkey, and you can watch another retro review if you want, and also eat turkey or whatever you're having. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, which if you're watching this outside the United States, you probably don't. Happy next Thursday! Anyway, next week, this batch of reviews of episodes dealing with other Earths continues with a look at another installment of Star Trek The Original Series, and it's a fun one, A Piece of the Action. See you then. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.